Hi there, everyone, and welcome back to the Message Marketing Pod. I'm your host, Christopher Melotti from Melotti Content Media, and this is a special episode of a special episode. Now, I know I do a lot of these special episodes with great guests, but we have a particularly exciting guest here today, and I'm really excited. This is Lisa Cox. I'm going to get her to introduce herself in just a second, but I'm going to read something of a bio that we put together for her, and this encapsulates her in a few sentences. And then we're going to talk about Lisa's impact through marketing, which is why I'm excited to talk to her today. So Lisa Cox has been a society transforming force in disability advocacy for 2 decades. Following an incredibly life-altering and unexpected medical event in 2005 that left her with multiple disabilities, Lisa leveraged her professional background in media and marketing to become a national and international volunteer and leader in the concept of greater disability inclusion. So she has combined her lived experience with her professional expertise to challenge and change the narrative around disability representation in Australia and beyond, creating a lasting impact on how the disabled community is viewed, treated, and included. So Lisa, that was an intro, but I'd love you to say hello, and then I'm going to ask you about marketing and how you used it for good. Lisa.
Sure. Hello. So that was quite an intro, and thank you very much for that. And I'm not sure what else is left to say now. As you mentioned, I
Sorry.
have my my background in media marketing communications. Specifically, I was a copywriter in advertising agencies for several years. I've had 2 uni degrees and a whole lot of stuff like that that's not really relevant. But out of the blue, I acquired all of my disabilities. And during that first year in hospital, I realized that in the strangest of ways, I could essentially mesh the two together, my
Yeah.
professional background and my lived experience, because when I returned to agency life, there was no representation of disability. And when there was, it was very tokenistic and these really narrow stereotypes. So we're either Paralympians or victims to be pitied. And I spent so many years creating visibility for my clients, their brands, messages, all those sorts of things. I realized that with a little bit of tweaking, could essentially transfer those principles over to create visibility for disability.
I love that, Lisa. And that's for everyone listening and watching. You all know that this is a very practical podcast. Like, we try and give lots and lots of tips and tricks. And I wanted Lisa on the show because I find that marketing is always used, it seems to be used in one direction, which is sell a product, right? And that's the default we go to. But selling a new era of diversity, like you've been, as we said in the bio, 2 decades of this. For everything that we take for granted in diversity today, Lisa, you have contributed so much to that. And I think, as unfortunate as the position is, you were given this gift to help others, because you were able to take those communication skills and everything we take it for granted as marketers to make a voice that many others aren't able to do. And so can I just get a bit of an understanding of how you put that marketing expertise into practice that cut through the noise and got you the respect that you deserve and the voice that you deserve?
Oh, well, when I did a bit of a review, I suppose, of the way disability in marketing or even some advocacy was being communicated, it was all very, let's go on Twitter and shout at each other, and it wasn't practical. And having once been the non-disabled content creator, advertising copywriter, like
Yeah.
screaming at me from social media and shaming me and just terrifying me was not going to change the way I worked and those sorts of things. So I needed to look at how we're communicating those really important messages and transform that. So that's what I've been doing. And the journey was an interesting one. So plus 15 years ago, started my business and thought, this is great. Inclusive advertising, marketing, it's so important. But approached leaders in business,
Mm.
CMOs, CFOs, heads of well-known media and marketing organizations that I'm sure many of your listeners would be familiar with,
Yeah.
and was essentially told, oh, why would we do that? That's just silly. There's no room or place for disability in advertising. That's ugh.
What? Did
So it
they
was
really?
disheartening.
So it was only just 15 years ago. Like we're talking, what are we talking? 2015? Is it even more? No,
Oh no, 2009 I started the business. So
God, so 2010, and people were saying, and that's not that long ago. Like if you think about it, 2010, it's not like it's 1990 or even 2000s. It was 2010 that there was an ick factor around like the inclusion of
there was, yeah, there was an X factor. And again, reviewing the way things were happening, I realized that so much of that was because we were going to brands, businesses, CMOs are saying, hey, include disability in your content because it's a nice thing to do for all people with disabilities. And that was sort of it. And yes, it's a great thing to do, but I've spent enough time in boardrooms to know that there are people making decisions about content who only want to know about the bottom of a profit and loss statement and those sorts of things. So I began to change my communication from, yes, it's a nice thing to do for society, but look how much money you can make. And of course, I'm not trying to commercialize disability in a horrible way here, but it's just twisting the message a little bit. So that was when TEDx approached me to do a TEDx talk about why diversity is good for business. And we looked at the trillions of dollars business is missing out on by not considering that 20% market share. And 20% is roughly the number of people globally who have a disability. So that doesn't even include our supporters, my husband, my family, those sorts of
allies.
people.
Mm.
But yes, it's a nice thing to do, but it's also very profitable and smart for businesses to consider the disability community.
And doesn't that show the power of positioning and messaging? I mean, we're both copywriters, right? But isn't that, it doesn't, like, I think that people underestimate that power, right? And I don't think you're commercializing disability, not at all. Because it's not like you're getting all that money. It's right, you're opening up the opportunity. So instead of saying, hey guys, look, this is like you said at the start, this is a pity message, right? Which was the go-to. That's the typical go-to for the initial response. But then what you did is you repositioned it, and then it became an opportunity rather than a nice to have. And that shows
Right.
the power of marketing, right? Like, and that's the real power. Like, the power of marketing is to foster change in a relevant and engaging way. And
Yes.
you knew your audience and you nailed it. So then what happened?
Well, I knew the US and the UK were two countries that were roughly a decade ahead of us, and they were doing really well and getting good results. But over here in Australia, it was a bit of a shit show, if I can use that word.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so looked at what they were doing as case studies, and then more broadly thought about what areas of popular culture, not just marketing, but film, advertising, fashion,
Hmm.
all of them. What can I personally have an impact on? Because at that time it was just me. I didn't have a huge team of 20 people, and so
Mm.
I began looking at little areas of popular culture that I could have an impact in, and slowly, very slowly but surely, we have seen the change. So something as simple as the media,
Yep.
journalists and newsrooms, how they position disability in headlines instead of saying Lisa is a wheelchair user, they might say Lisa is bound to a wheelchair or Lisa is confined to a wheelchair. And even though some people might think, oh, it's just semantics, it's just words, no big deal. What that does is plant the seed subconsciously that a wheelchair or a mobility device is burdensome and everyone in one must be pitied and felt sorry for at all times,
Mm.
which isn't the truth. I love my wheelchair. It gets me around the gym, around the world, and so many people feel the same way. So there's those sorts of things in media specifically, but there are all sorts of little pockets throughout popular culture that we're looking to change. But knowing the power and influence of the advertising industry, I recognise that's really one place where we can start, because my disabilities and so much about disability can't be changed, fixed, cured, or even improved. But the inclusion of people with disabilities in advertising is something we can fix right away.
I love it, Lisa. And then what I love about your story is it wasn't like this was all just I just said this, right? What I loved most about what your story is, you created essentially the brand guidelines for disability vernacular, and I'll get you to talk about that. But this again, key takeaways for everyone is it's not like messaging resonates when it's clear and consistent and there's a guidelines to it that everyone can jump on board and understand and use. It's not like you do it once and then you forget it because it doesn't become memorable. And so what I loved about what you did, Lisa, is like a good business puts together a brand guidelines and messaging guidelines that they can use. You, Lisa, did this for the disability sector and all the media around it. Do you want to explain how you did that?
Correct. So I was part of a team at Media Diversity Australia. I still am there helping out. And through my own experience, one being a content creator, a writer, and secondly being on the other side of the camera and being interviewed, I know that journalists and people like that don't go out of their way to be absolute assholes. Basically, they just don't have the skills and the knowledge to know how to do better. And I used to be one of those people. So what we wanted to do was put together a really practical guide that said to journalists, okay, if you're going to talk about disability or interview people with disabilities, instead of being terrified of it and just not doing it as a result, here's how to do it well. So importantly, that was co-designed in conjunction with peak disability bodies, people with disabilities, and working journalists. Because I did a review of what was out there before we put that together, and there were some really well-meaning advocates who had no media experience, so didn't understand why we were doing things a certain way. By the same token, there were really well-meaning journalists who had some experience with disability. So we found a common ground where we could put those two together in the guidebook, and it's just been updated with the new chapters specifically about advertising and marketing, which I'm so excited about because that's my jam. But if anyone from your audience is looking for practical tips and suggestions for how to include disability in their content without fear of being called out or something like that, shamed on X or Twitter or
Yeah, right, right.
I know.
We are, we are, and it's and like you said, it's not because we're out to be ignorant. I mean,
Yeah.
I know it can be ignorance by not trying, but Lisa, you've been such a great advocate because you co-authored that disability reporting handbook, and what it does is it arms all industries with the vernacular that they need, and it's not about, it's just there's a respect there, there's a dignity there, but it's not just that. It's like bringing it back to that profit message. There is
Yeah.
such an untapped potential there. It's not like, oh, I'll include them just because I want it to be a give back, right?
Yeah, no, not that at all. It's
No.
really, really without sounding horrible about it, it's really profitable. And knowing that some of your audience will be CMOs and that's what they need to hear,
Yeah.
um, that's it's worth millions,
Yeah.
trillions.
And so can you, Lisa, can you explain what people can do as businesses, companies, because all different people listen to this, of what can inspire people? How to, like, if you say, oh, look, it's worth, there's profit in there. What does someone do as a business to jump on this opportunity?
Well, since the disability reporting handbook came out, and since I did my TED talk about why diversity is good for business, I'm really excited that lots more reports and things have come out showing the commercial viability of including disability in content. So the Unstereotype Alliance, which is part of Your Own Women, they look at all sorts of diversity, specifically in advertising. They recently released a report about basically why woke is not broke, because there's that title saying woke is broke, but
Yeah.
it's not. And we now have data to show that, a lot of data. So there's been more and more reports and everything coming out, which is fantastic.
Yeah. That's great. And that's what we want to do is so is it being more open to the language, obviously, that's set out in your book, but also is it incorporating more diversity in the ads that we use, in the promotions that we conduct? Is that how people can use? Because when there's a lot of talk, and I write a lot of policies around diversity and inclusion,
Mhm.
and being from the LGBTQ community myself,
Yeah.
I get that side. But how does a company, do they just proactively include them in, people living with disabilities in casting? How do we do this?
Okay, there are so many ways, and when I talk about visibility of disability, that isn't just white heterosexual guys in wheelchairs on
Yes. Yeah.
television. It's a very intersectional community. There are people from your community who have disability and of all different cultural backgrounds and all those sorts of things.
Yes.
Visibility isn't just what you're seeing, it's also what you're hearing, the voices you're hearing on the radio and television, the stories you're hearing about. So uh, disability doesn't just have to be about wheelchairs and the NDIS.
Yeah.
We are such a diverse group where we have interests in politics, pets, fashion, all the stuff you can think of. We have an interest in. So if you are casting, consider casting someone with a disability, not just in front of the camera, behind as well. I've done some work with a fantastic organisation called Bus Stop Films. They're based here in Sydney, and I'm speaking at one of their events later in the year. And they employ trained people with disabilities to be behind the camera. So perhaps your organisation, for whatever reason, can't have people in front of the camera with disabilities. I don't see why not, but anyway, let's just
Yeah.
pretend. There's no reason why you can't have a camera crew or producer or someone like that who has disabilities.
Yeah, I think, and as I said, like, I think that diversity and inclusion, see, unfortunately, it gets a little bit of a negative slant to it because people think, oh, I just have to tick some boxes because that's our society today. And I love what you said, Lisa, which is marketing brain, is reposition it. It's not meant to be a let's just tick a box and play the game, right? That's not what it's about. Like you were saying, Lisa, there's so much opportunity to connect with different audiences, that are integrated in our society that don't get the right representation. And
I know.
and marketing is one of the best ways to ignite it, because I feel like marketing, as you know, Lisa, leads the charge in a lot because it's exposure. And when you've got it across, when you've got inclusion in casting and hiring and all these kind of things, you set the example that it's normal. It's normalcy, right? Like it's just society. Everyone's part of it. And as a result, it's washed over all of our marketing, all of our sales, all of our expertise. And I think that's where you're going with it, isn't it, Lisa?
That's exactly right. Even though we make up roughly 20% of the global community, some Nielsen data showed that the representation of disability in primetime advertising was 1% or less in some studies.
Yeah.
And that's pretty rubbish, not just for society, but also for companies, bottom line, who perhaps want to reach an extra 20% market share.
And that's it. And I think that's your point, Lisa, isn't it? Like, is marketing can use and adapt to diverse principles
Yeah.
for opportunity, right? So it's not saying, oh, we're just doing a bit of a throwaway. Oh, let's just include someone with a disability because we should. That's not what it's about.
Oh, yeah. No.
No, right, and speak out, Liz. Like, get angry at that, because that's what I think people often think is they go, oh, I've heard the diversity hire, right, and things like that.
Oh, yeah. No. So I've been the diversity hire and I hate it.
Yeah, hit out.
People
Yeah,
need to be aware that their audiences, their consumers are really savvy and we can spot it. We can see really, really quickly whether it's gender disability or something else. It's quite obvious to a consumer. So that's why you need to make sure there's the right foundations in place and get it right early on from the scripting and during the shoot and everything like that.
no, I love it. I love it. So for everyone, how would you wrap it up? Would you say for everyone who's thinking, I didn't realize this was such an opportunity, I want to take something away? what would you say? I know we talked about this a lot, but I really want people to get it into their head that this is not just, all right, let's find someone in a wheelchair, like you said. Like, this is about opening your mind to opportunity. What would you
Yeah.
say?
There's so much more opportunity out there than you might think. So thinking back to 2009, when I started the business, I was randomly Googling talent with disabilities, all sorts of things like that. There was nothing that I could find anyway in Australia. These days, there are talent agencies specifically for talent with disabilities. There's people like Bus Stop Films who can provide the crew. In the back of the disability report handbook, we have a list of here's where you can go for crew, here's where you can go for talent, etc. So those opportunities are now there, and now more than ever, there are no excuses not to include disability in marketing and advertising content, because the long-term bigger picture is that putting disability in your content, as you mentioned before, normalizes it, which flows on to affect bigger social outcomes like our employment and our healthcare and all of those sorts of things.
Yep. And with such a, like 20% is what, 1/5, right? So
Yep.
that's a huge audience that will be inspired when they're represented. And so for businesses out there, it's time to start thinking, not diversity for diversity's sake, but
Yeah.
diversity for opportunities, inclusion, respect, dignity, but also, like you said, it's that there's a profitable part of it. And
Right.
reframing that message is so key.
And
So
it goes on to have all sorts of other side effects, I suppose. There are plenty of leaders out there in the business community at the moment who don't disclose that they have an invisible disability because there's such a stigma in society around it. So just by normalizing disability through advertising, marketing, and other pop culture,
yeah.
it makes it easier for those sorts of people to disclose if they choose to.
If they want to, yeah. And so there's a confidence thing, there's a hiring capability
Yeah,
thing. Well, I think this is all great. Look, like Lisa, you're an inspiring leader. Your work has honestly transformed the landscape of people living with disabilities in Australia. And it's your dedication, your perseverance, and your innovation and your innovative approach to this disability advocacy that I'm inspired by. And that's why I wanted to interview you today and explain everything. So thank you so much, Lisa, for joining us in this episode. I think that for everyone who's doing marketing and in a business that is thriving, growing, I'm sure that Lisa has planted a lot of seeds of thought in your mind that you probably never even thought of. Like you said, Lisa, it's not that they were going out intentionally to be that. It's just it never crossed their mind. And podcasts like this allow me to showcase this narrative.
I used to do that non-disabled leader who was terrified of getting it wrong or stepping on someone's toes. So I did nothing, and that was the wrong thing to do. So now I'm trying through my work and work with others to empower professionals to include disability, because it's not something to be scared of. And we can talk about the pedantics of scripting or how to pan a camera and all those sorts of things, having experienced both as someone with disabilities, but also having spent so much time in the industry.
Well, thank you, Lisa. Thank you so much for joining us. Please reach out to Lisa, add her on LinkedIn, jump on her website. She has lots and lots of information. She's got that book there that you can have a look at. It's excellent. Thank you, Lisa, for joining me today. And this has been the Message Marketing Pod, a special episode with Lisa Cox. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And please join me in the next episode. Thank you. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you.